Right now, in local service businesses all across the country, there are thousands upon thousands of dollars of automated systems just sitting quietly in the corner, gathering dust, completely abandoned by the people who bought it.
Yeah. It's an incredibly common story.
Think about that for a second.
Right.
We're talking about smart, pragmatic business owners. The people listening to this deep dive right now, people who run HVAC fleets, plumbing operations, electrical outfits, they sign these massive checks for software that does the work, thinking it was going to save them from, like, a mountain of overhead.
Right, and instead, it just became an expensive paperweight.
Exactly. So today, we're going to look at exactly why 30% of digital labor projects end up in the trash. And, more importantly, how you can guarantee you aren't one of them.
It is a staggering reality, isn't it? It's one that nobody in the technology sales space actually wants to talk about. The focus is always on the capability, right? Never on the graveyard of abandoned projects.
Which is exactly why I wanted to do this deep dive with you. Because as a business owner myself, I am inherently skeptical of this stuff. I've lived this nightmare.
Oh, I'm sure you have.
Yeah. Just the other day, I was talking to a buddy of mine. He runs a pretty sizable local service business, real nut and bolts operation. A few months ago, he gets swept up in the hype. He goes to some industry conference. Here's a slick presentation about how these automated systems are going to revolutionize his back office. And he just, pulls the trigger.
Let me guess the trajectory here. He spent a small fortune on the initial license, probably dropped another, $5,000 trying to integrate it into whatever homegrown dispatching setup he has.
Exactly. And then the classic tragedy unfolds. They set it up in one department. The vendor said it was ready. The lights blinked. But then nothing happened.
Nothing at all.
Nothing. He just watched this shiny new capability sit there. 8 months go by, and he realizes his management team has quietly stopped bringing it up in their weekly meetings. Nobody talks about it. It's just this elephant in the room. And he's sitting across from me at lunch, pounding his fist on the table, saying, this whole industry is built on hype and snake oil. It's a complete scam.
I hear that exact sentiment constantly, and frankly, it is completely understandable why he feels burned. But, I have to reframe his entire premise here. His anger is pointed in the wrong direction.
Wait, really? How so?
Because the purchase itself, that specific piece of software he bought, was almost certainly not the problem. The failure was that nobody in his company bothered to map the work first.
So you're saying the tool was fine, but the user was incompetent? Because I got to tell you, that sounds like the classic IT department defense. User error.
No, it's not about incompetence. It's about sequence. Here is the absolute core rule for you, for your friend, and for anyone listening to this deep dive right now. You cannot buy your way into automation. It is a fundamental impossibility.
Okay, unpack that. Because they certainly try to sell it that way.
Of course they do. But you cannot just purchase a capability off a shelf and assume operational efficiency will magically follow. You have to examine your entire operation in the cold light of day and find exactly where your people are doing repetitive work that moves the business absolutely nowhere. Your friend bought a solution, walked back into his office, and then started wandering around looking for a problem to point it at.
Ah. He bought the wheels before he even knew what kind of wagon he was trying to build.
Yeah.
Or what terrain it had to cross. I see what you're saying. If you don't know exactly what the machine is supposed to lift, you have no business buying the crane.
Precisely. And to understand why buying a tool blindly always fails, we first have to deconstruct the fundamentally flawed math that business owners use when they're sitting at their desks trying to decide whether to automate a process in the first place.
The spreadsheet math.
Right. The spreadsheet they are looking at is lying to them because they are putting the wrong numbers into the cells. So today, our mission is to look at the real numbers. We are going to break down the honest, unvarnished economics of digital labor versus human labor.
Okay, I'm locking in on this. Because as someone who has to make payroll every single Friday, I am tired of being sold to by tech evangelists who have never actually hired or fired a human being. Let's tear down this flawed math. When I look at the cost of a person versus the cost of a machine, what is the trap I'm falling into?
The most dangerous trap is comparing the cost of an automated system directly to an employee's base salary. It is a total apples to oranges comparison that completely distorts your operational reality.
Wait, why? If someone pitches me a software package and they say it costs $30,000 a year, my immediate thought is, well, my entry-level admin back at the office makes $45,000 a year, so if I buy this, I'm saving $15,000. You're telling me that math is garbage?
It is absolute garbage.
Wow.
Don't hold back. I won't, because it's garbage, because a base salary is just the starting line of what an employee actually costs your business. If we want to make a fair comparison, we need to talk about the fully loaded cost of a human worker. When you look at the labor economics research, the total cost of ownership for a human employee tells a very stark story. Let's work the math out loud right now so we can see the real numbers.
Let's do it.
Okay, let's invent a mid-level professional in your office. Let's say their base salary is $70,000.
Okay, 70 grand. That's a solid middle-of-the-road salary for a competent office manager, an inventory specialist, or like a senior dispatcher.
Right. So you write a check for $70,000 of gross pay. But what else are you paying? First, we have to stack the employer payroll taxes. You've got FICA, unemployment taxes, workers' compensation premiums.
Which vary by state, but generally that's instantly adding about 8 to 10% right off the top.
Exactly. Then you add the benefits package, health insurance, dental, vision. And we know those premiums aren't exactly dropping year over year. The burden on the employer to cover those premiums is massive.
It's agonizing. It feels like every renewal period is another gut punch. I mean, if you want to offer competitive health care to keep good people, you're looking at $12,000 to $18,000 a year per person just for basic family coverage. And that's before we even talk about 401k matching.
Right. And then we have to factor in paid leave, vacation days, sick days, statutory holidays. If you give someone 3 weeks of paid time off plus 10 federal holidays, they are out of the office for nearly a month every year.
Yep.
You are paying their full salary for a month where they were producing zero output for the business.
I try not to think about that part too often. But yes, it's a direct cost. We're paying for time, not just production.
Then we have to look at the physical requirements of employing a human being. The equipment, the laptop, the dual monitors, the ergonomic chair, the software licenses, their seat on your CRM, their email hosting, their mobile phone stipend.
Don't forget the physical office space.
Whoa, absolutely. Commercial real estate is a brutal expense. If your office space costs $25 to $50 per square foot annually, the actual square footage that employee occupies, plus their share of the break room and the bathrooms, adds thousands of dollars a year to their ledger.
When you list it out like that, it's a little overwhelming. But honestly, those are just the hard, predictable costs. The stuff that really bleeds my margins is the indirect stuff. Turnover, recruiting.
That is exactly where the math gets staggering. Think about the recruitment and onboarding cycle. If you use an external recruiter, you're paying 15 to 20% of the first year's salary just as a bounty. If you do it internally, you are absorbing the cost of job board postings, background checks, and the massive amount of unbillable hours you and your management team spend reading resumes and interviewing candidates.
And even when you finally find someone good, they don't just walk in on day one and start generating revenue. There is a massive lag.
Yes. The most expensive hidden cost of human capital is the productivity ramp-up time. The data shows it generally takes 3 to 6 months for a new hire to reach full productivity and understand the nuances of your specific operation.
Right.
During that 6-month window, you are paying 100% of their fully loaded costs, but you are maybe getting 50% efficiency out of them.
And it's worse than that because they aren't just slow. They are actively dragging down the efficiency of my senior staff. My best dispatcher has to stop roading trucks every 20 minutes to answer a question from the new guy about how to use the scheduling software.
Yeah. Exactly. They are a temporary operational drag. So when you take all of those layers, taxes, benefits, paid leave, physical space, software seats, recruitment, and the ramp-up drag, and you stack them on top of that base salary, what does that $70,000 employee actually cost your business?
I'm almost afraid to hear the number.
The standard multiplier accepted by operational analysts is roughly 1.3 to 1.7 times the base pay, depending on your benefits package. So that $70,000 salary is actually a $91,000 to $119,000 a year committed cost.
Wow. Okay. I'll just react honestly to that. That is a gut punch.
It changes the perspective, doesn't it?
Yeah. When you see it laid out on the table like that, nearly 120 grand for a $70,000 role, that makes the concept of digital labor look incredibly tempting. If I can buy a machine for 30 grand, why wouldn't I do that immediately?
Well, it looks tempting, but we have to keep the comparison fair. If we are going fully unvarnished on the human side, we have to be equally unvarnished on the technology side.
Good, because I have a major objection here. And this is the argument my management team gives me every time we talk about automating things. One thing a human being can do that a machine fundamentally cannot do is adapt on the fly.
Okay, go on.
If a process breaks or a weird non-standard edge case invoice comes in with a handwritten note on it, a person can usually figure it out.
Mm.
They can call the vendor, they can walk down the hall and ask a colleague, they can use their common sense. Technology doesn't have common sense, it just stalls, it throws an error code, stops working, and creates a bottleneck.
I concede that point completely. That is a fundamental truth of business operations, and anyone who tells you otherwise is selling you something.
Right.
And because of that inherent rigidity, we cannot pretend that digital employees are free to operate, nor can we pretend they are fully autonomous straight out of the box. If we are going to fully load the human cost, we must fully load the technology cost.
I appreciate that. So let's strip away the vendor marketing. What are the hidden costs on the automated side? Because I know that monthly subscription fee they advertise on the website is never the whole story.
Not even close. Automated systems carry very specific, very real burdens. First, you have the initial setup and integration costs. These systems don't just plug themselves into your business like a toaster. You have to pay someone, either an internal IT person or an external consultant, to map the data, connect the communication pipelines between your different pieces of software, and customize the workflows to your specific business rules. That initial project can easily be a $5,000 to $20,000 upfront capital expense.
Right, because my CRM doesn't naturally talk to my accounting software. Somebody has to build the bridge.
Yeah.
And then I'm assuming they're ongoing usage costs, not a one-and-done purchase.
Correct. The ongoing costs are variable. Many platforms charge based on volume, how many interactions the system has, how much server compute time it uses, how many times it extracts data from a document. You also have to budget for maintenance. When the underlying software updates or when a vendor you work with changes how their forms look, your automated system might break.
Makes sense.
You have to pay someone to go in and fix the bridge, just like you pay a mechanic to maintain a fleet of physical trucks. You have to pay to maintain your digital infrastructure.
Okay, so I've got setup costs, usage fees, and maintenance. That all sounds like standard IT budget stuff.
It is, but I haven't even mentioned the most critical line item yet. This is the cost that almost every single business owner forgets to budget for, and it is the primary reason their ROI calculations end up looking foolish in hindsight. It's what the industry calls the oversight tax.
The oversight tax, break that down for me. What is that?
It is the human review time that never fully goes away. You just mentioned earlier that when technology hits a weird edge case, it stalls. Well, when it stalls, someone has to intervene. Someone has to monitor that system. Someone has to review the output of the automated side to ensure accuracy, especially in the early months of deployment. Let's say you build an automated system to generate preliminary estimates for plumbing jobs based on customer emails. Even if the system does 90% of the heavy lifting, a master plumber or a senior estimator still has to spend 5 minutes reviewing and tweaking every single estimate before it gets emailed to the client. That review time carries a very real staff cost.
Ah, the light bulb just went on. So if I have a highly paid service manager spending 2 hours a day just babysitting the automated systems, clearing error codes, and checking the machines work, I have to factor their hourly rate into the cost of the technology itself.
Exactly. The machine isn't running independently, it's running with human supervision. The oversight tax is very real. So now we have finally reached a point of honesty. We have the honest costs of both sides laid out on the table. We have the fully loaded human cost taxes, benefits, ramp-up time, overhead, versus the total technology cost setup, usage, maintenance, and the oversight tax. Now, and only now, that we are comparing apples to apples, can we run the actual formula to see who wins.
This is where it gets really interesting for me, because you are saying there's an actual mathematical formula to determine this. It's not a gut feeling. It's not about being pro-tech or old school. It's just an equation.
It is pure unemotional math. This is the absolute heart of the deep dive. The formula that changes everything is what we call the break-even math. And here is how you calculate it. Take the fixed monthly cost of the automated setup. Then divide that number by the difference between what a person costs per task and what the system costs per task.
Okay, let me make sure I have this conceptually. I'm taking the fixed monthly cost of the tech and I'm dividing it by the human cost per task minus the tech cost per task.
Correct. You are finding the savings per task and seeing how many tasks it takes to pay off the monthly fixed fee. The result of that calculation is the exact number of tasks per month required before the math turns in your favor.
Okay, conceptually I'm with you, but I need to hear this applied to reality. Let's walk through some examples, and let's do it slowly, so a listener who is currently driving a service truck out to a job site can easily follow along in their head without needing a whiteboard.
Let's do it. Example number 1, invoice processing. This is a very common, highly repetitive back office task in almost every service business. You get bills from suppliers, you have to log them, check them against purchase orders, and pay them. Let's look at the digital side first. Let's say the fixed cost of the automated setup, which includes the monthly subscription, the baseline maintenance, and the amortized integration costs we talked about, is about $375 a month.
Okay, $375 fixed. I write that check every month just to keep the lights on for the machine.
Exactly. Now, we calculate the human cost. When you take the fully loaded cost of an accounts payable clerk, the salary, the benefits, the desk space, and you divide it by the number of invoices they realistically process in a day, factoring in coffee breaks and meetings, it costs your business roughly $6.25 per invoice for a person to do it.
$6.25 to process one piece of paper. That sounds absurdly high until I remember all those fully loaded layers we just stacked up. It's not just their hourly wage, it's the cost of everything required to keep them in that chair.
Exactly right. Now, let's look at the variable cost for the automated system. Once the fixed fee is paid, the actual compute power and the data extraction fees to process one invoice through the software that does the work is about 6 cents.
6 cents versus $6.25. That's a massive spread.
It is. So we run the formula. We take the $375 fixed cost and we divide it by the difference between the human cost, which is $6.25, and the automated cost, which is 6 cents. So we are dividing 375 by $6.19. The result of that equation is roughly 61. 61 invoices a month.
So translate that into plain English for the business owner. What does the number 61 mean for my bottom line?
It means if your business processes exactly 61 invoices a month, the total cost of paying a human and the total cost of running the automated system are exactly the same. That is your break-even point. At 61 invoices, it's a tie.
Okay, I'm going to challenge this right now. What if I run a smaller shop? What if I'm a specialized custom electrical contractor? I don't buy a lot of generic parts, and I only process 40 invoices a month.
Then a person is genuinely cheaper, and you absolutely should not automate that process.
Wait, really? The operations expert is telling me not to use the technology.
Absolutely. Emphatically no, because at 40 invoices a month, you are not generating enough volume to absorb the fixed monthly cost of $375. Your cost savings per invoice don't multiply fast enough to cover the base fee. You would be actively losing money every single month by automating it. If you forced it, you would just be adding a dusty dashboard to your business just like your friend did.
That is a massive paradigm shift. Because the vendor sales pitch is always universally, automate everything, it's the future, save money. But the math coldly says, if you don't have the volume, you are bleeding cash.
But we have to look at the exponential flip side of that exact same math. Let's say your electrical business grows. You scale up, you take on commercial contracts, you acquire a smaller competitor, and suddenly your back office is processing 6,000 invoices a month.
Okay, now we're talking serious enterprise volume. The paperwork is piling up to the ceiling.
If you are at 6,000 invoices a month, that exact same automated setup runs about 33 times cheaper than a human team.
33 times cheaper. That is an insane multiple. How does that work?
Think about the physical reality of the work. To process 6,000 invoices a month manually, you cannot just ask your one accounts payable clerk to work harder. You would need to hire, train, provide benefits for, and rent office space for an entire department of accounts payable clerks. The fully loaded human cost would scale linearly and become astronomical. But on the digital side, the fixed costs barely change, and the variable cost remains just 6 pennies per invoice. It is the exact same fundamental task, reading a vendor invoice and entering the data into a ledger, but it yields the complete opposite answer. Volume is the whole story.
Volume is the whole story. That is the clearest explanation of this I have ever heard. Let's do another example, because I really want to cement this logic. What about something more complex than an invoice? What about something that requires more brain power?
Let's look at example 2, contract review. This is a very different beast. Let's say your business regularly signs non-disclosure agreements, subcontractor agreements, or complex service-level guarantees. Reviewing these requires heavy reading, checking for specific liability clauses, making sure the payment terms match your standard operating procedures. Because it's a highly complex task, the human cost per task is much, much higher. You aren't paying an entry-level clerk to redline a legal contract. You might have a senior manager, a VP of operations, or even internal counsel doing this. Their fully loaded hourly rate is substantial.
Right. If my VP of operations makes 150 grand a year and it takes him an hour to properly review and mark up a subcontractor agreement, that 1 hour of his time is incredibly expensive.
Exactly. Let's say fully loaded, it costs $100 of human time to review one contract. Because the human cost is so incredibly high, the break-even threshold drops dramatically. With contract review, the math usually shows that you only need to process 10 to 15 contracts a month before the automated system becomes cheaper.
That's fascinating. So even at a relatively low volume, just a dozen contracts a month, the digital labor wins. Not because it's doing millions of repetitions, but because the human time it's replacing is so incredibly expensive.
Precisely. The wider the gap between the human cost per task and the digital cost per task, the lower your break-even volume needs to be. Let's look at a third example that really highlights this dynamic in a way every business owner feels painfully: high-volume resume screening.
Oh, this is a massive pain point for every local service business right now. Finding good talent is impossible. You put out an ad on a job board for an experienced dispatcher and you get 200 resumes in 3 days, and 90% of them are completely unqualified. People who don't even have a driver's license applying for field roles.
Right, it's a flood of noise. And someone on your payroll, usually an HR manager or you, the owner, has to physically sit there and read every single one of those 200 resumes just to figure out the 10 people who are actually worth a phone call. The human time spent is high, the fully loaded cost of the HR manager is high, and the task itself is highly repetitive and, frankly, mind-numbing. Because of those factors, the break-even threshold for automated resume screening is incredibly low. In a high-volume recruitment scenario, that break-even threshold is often crossed in week 1.
Week 1. You mean it pays for itself in the first 5 days?
Yes. By day 5 of your hiring campaign, the software that does the work has processed so many resumes and saved so many hours of your HR manager's time that it has already paid for its entire monthly fixed cost. Every single resume it screens for the rest of the month is pure, undeniable savings compared to paying a human to do it.
So what does this all mean? If I'm looking at these 3 examples, invoices, contracts, resumes, and I'm trying to summarize the aha moment here, I think the conclusion is that there's no such thing as a business that should automate.
Exactly. That phrase is meaningless.
There are only specific tasks at specific volumes that pencil out. If you don't run the math on the specific task, you aren't making a strategic business decision. You are just gambling with your operating capital.
You are throwing darts blindfolded and hoping you hit a bullseye.
Okay, so let's extrapolate this. Let's say I run a larger service business. I'm doing $10 million in revenue. I sit down, I do the math, and I realize I crossed the break-even threshold on invoicing, on scheduling, on dispatch routing, on resume screening, on inventory reordering. If the technology is so cheap and so efficient at high volumes, my immediate thought as a ruthless bottom-line business owner might be, great, I've solved the puzzle. I should fire my entire back office and replace them all with digital employees. 0 payroll taxes, 0 sick days.
And if you did that, it would be the fastest, most efficient way to completely bankrupt your company.
I want to be incredibly emphatic about this point for everyone listening, because this is where the conversation usually derails. This deep dive is not a roadmap for replacing your team. We are going to aggressively kill that idea right now. Because if you look closely at any successful business, there are areas where people still win, and they win by an absolute landslide.
The human element is completely irreplaceable in the core functions that actually generate long-term value for a business. The research is unambiguous on this point. There are vast critical areas of your operation where the contribution from machine-handled work is absolutely minimal, and the human being is the entire value proposition.
Walk me through that. Give me some concrete examples of where people win and why the machine fails.
The first major category is complex judgment. We are talking about making a difficult decision when you only have 60% of the information available. Technology requires complete, structured data to make a decision. If the data is incomplete, the system freezes. Humans, on the other hand, use intuition, context, and years of hard-won experience to bridge the gap. The second category is reading a room. A machine cannot walk into a client's living room, sense the subtle tension between a husband and wife about how much money to spend on a new AC unit, and adjust its communication style on the fly to make them comfortable.
Right. Think about the reality of my industry. You have an angry customer whose basement is currently flooded because a pipe burst at 2 a.m. They're standing in 2 inches of water. They're stressed. They're furious. They're terrified about the cost of the damage, and they are probably yelling. An automated system cannot calm that person down. It cannot look them in the eye, show genuine empathy, and reassure them that your team has dealt with this 100 times and the problem is going to be handled.
Exactly. Empathy is a uniquely human competitive advantage. No line of code can replicate the trust built by a human looking another human in the eye and saying, I've got this.
Mhm.
We're also talking about strategic advisory, looking at a commercial client's overall situation, noticing something they didn't even ask about, and recommending a long-term plan that saves them money over the next 5 years. And finally, the most important element of all, building decade-long relationships. People buy from people they trust. You cannot build a 10-year, highly profitable referral network with an automated system.
So if we look at the whole board, the technology is infinitely better at high-volume, repetitive, structured tasks. And humans are infinitely better at empathy, complex judgment, ambiguity, and relationship building. If those are the two realities, what is the actual goal here? What is the model we are trying to build?
The goal, the absolute target state for any smart, modern organization, is a hybrid model. It is the perfect intentional marriage of the two capabilities. You divide the labor based on what each side does best. The technology carries the burden of scale, consistency, and 247 availability. The automated systems don't need to sleep, they don't get tired at 4 p.m. on a Friday, and they don't make transposition errors when manually moving data from an email into a spreadsheet. They carry the heavy, boring load.
And the people. What happens to the people in this hybrid model?
The people carry the burden of judgment and relationships. They handle the nuanced escalations that the machine flags. They handle the angry customer with the flooded basement. They sit down with your top 10 clients and take them to lunch to secure their business for next year.
This is a vital takeaway for the business owner listening to this right now. The goal of this entire exercise is not fewer people on your payroll. Let me say that again, louder. The goal is not headcount reduction. The goal is ensuring that your people, the expensive, valuable, highly trained humans you fought so hard to hire and retain, are spending their hours on work that actually moves the business forward, rather than drowning in mindless data entry.
Think of it this way. If you have a highly paid service manager spending 4 hours a day copying and pasting customer addresses from a generic inbox into your dispatch software, you aren't getting the value of their judgment, their industry knowledge, or their relationship building skills. You are paying an absolute premium for a human being to act like a very slow, highly error-prone robot. It's a massive misallocation of your most valuable capital.
Okay, I am completely sold on this hybrid model. It sounds entirely logical, it sounds highly profitable, and frankly, it sounds like common sense. It's exactly how I would want my business to run. But here is the friction point. If it makes so much sense, and the math is so clear, why do so many owners end up with the dusty dashboard I mentioned in the cold open? Why did my buddy waste thousands of dollars on a system that nobody in his company will even talk about? What is the disconnect between this beautiful theory and the messy reality?
That is the million-dollar question. And to answer it, I have to share a sobering, almost depressing statistic from the industry research. Despite all the hype, all the promises, and all the money spent, roughly 30% of these digital labor projects get abandoned entirely.
30%. Almost 1 in 3 projects just go straight into the trash can. That is an appalling failure rate for capital investments.
Yes. The projects are quietly shut down, the software subscriptions are discreetly canceled, the internal champions of the project stop talking about it, and the business slowly, painfully reverts back to doing things manually with sticky notes and spreadsheets.
I have to laugh cynically at that, because I can guarantee you will never hear a 30% failure rate mentioned in the vendor's sales pitch. The software rep never sits across your desk, hands you a contract, and says, sign here, and just so you know, there's a 1 in 3 chance this entire thing is a total waste of your money and time.
Of course not. That wouldn't exactly help them hit their quarterly quota. But what's fascinating here is why these projects fail. When we dig into the postmortems of these abandoned systems, the failure is rarely because the software that does the work is technically broken. The code usually functions exactly as it was designed to function.
So the tool isn't effective. Then what goes wrong? Why does it fall apart when it hits the real world?
These projects fail because of 3 massive operational blind spots that the business owner ignored before they ever wrote the check. First, poor data quality. This is fatal. If your internal data is a mess, if your customer records are full of misspellings, if your inventory codes are inconsistent, if half your files are missing critical fields, feeding that dirty data into an automated system doesn't fix the mess. It just creates a faster, more efficient mess. The machine will faithfully execute instructions on garbage data, and the output will be garbage at scale.
So if my dispatchers have been lazy for 3 years and putting customer phone numbers in the address field, the machine is going to completely choke when it tries to send automated text messages.
Precisely. The machine assumes the data is perfectly structured. When it isn't, the system breaks. Second blind spot, weak risk controls. The business doesn't understand the compliance or security implications of the process they're automating. What if the automated system inadvertently emails a highly sensitive, confidential commercial bid to the wrong subcontractor because a rule was set up incorrectly? The damage can be catastrophic. And third, and arguably most importantly, a complete lack of a defined success metric.
Meaning they start the race, but they haven't drawn a finish line. They don't even know what winning looks like.
Exactly. They implement the technology purely on vibes. They buy the capability because they want to feel innovative, but they never established a baseline. They never measured how long the human process took before the software or what it costs per unit. So 6 months later, when the CFO asks, "Did this save us money?" nobody can answer the question. They can't prove the ROI because they didn't keep score before the game started.
That traces right back to my buddy. He bought the tool because the marketing at the conference made him feel like he was falling behind his competitors. He acted out of FOMO, but he didn't have a plan.
Exactly. I completely agree with your assessment of your friend's situation, but I want to turn the blame squarely back toward the process itself. The root cause of the failure. The fundamental reason 30% of these initiatives die a slow death traces back to skipping the operational review. As we established in the very beginning, an owner bought a capability and then went hunting for a problem to point it at. It is a fundamentally backwards approach. When you buy the tool first, you are trying to force your business to fit the software instead of building a system that fits your actual business.
Okay, the diagnosis is clear. Buying the software first is backwards. It leads to the dusty dashboard. So what does doing it right actually look like? If I am a practical business owner, I've got a budget, and I want to be in the 70% that actually succeed and see a return, what is my correct first step?
The correct first step, from the owner's point of view, is a massive, incredibly detailed discovery conversation. And this conversation must cover the entire operation end to end, not just one isolated department.
Let me push back on that. Why the whole operation? Why can't I just run a pilot program? Why can't I just say, let's start with the HR department, automate a few things there, see how it goes, and if we like it, we'll roll it out to dispatch next year?
That sounds reasonable in theory, but it fails in practice because business processes rarely live in isolation. A process is a river. It might start in sales when a lead comes in, flow through dispatch to schedule the call, hit the field technician on their mobile device, bounce over to inventory to order parts, and finally end up in accounts payable for invoicing. If you only look at the HR department or the dispatch desk in isolation, you are missing all the upstream and downstream effects. If you automate a process in dispatch, you might accidentally create a massive, unmanageable bottleneck in inventory because they aren't prepared for the speed of the new data flow.
I see. It's an ecosystem. If you change the temperature in one room, it affects the draft in the whole house. So you have to map the whole ecosystem. How do you actually do that? Do I just give the consultant my company's standard operating procedure manual and tell them to read it?
Absolutely not. And here's the crucial part of the discovery phase. You have to watch how the work actually moves in reality. You cannot just read the official process document.
Oh, because the SOP manual is usually a complete work of fiction.
Exactly. It's a fairy tale. Work never moves the way the official process document says it does. That document was written 3 years ago, probably by a middle manager who doesn't even work at the company anymore, to satisfy some compliance audit. Work actually moves via undocumented, organic workarounds. It moves via physical sticky notes stuck to the side of monitors. It moves via a quick, unofficial text message between two dispatchers who are friends. It moves via that one incredibly loyal employee who stays late every single Thursday night to manually reconcile a broken spreadsheet for reasons nobody in leadership has ever bothered to write down or question.
I feel personally attacked right now because every single local business has that one person. We call it mental duct tape. The process is fundamentally broken, but Sarah, in accounting, holds it together with mental duct tape because she knows exactly which 3 buttons to push to make the error message go away.
Yes. And if you don't uncover Sarah's mental duct tape, your automated system will break on day one because the machine doesn't know about the duct tape. It only knows the rigid rules you feed it. So during this massive discovery phase, we are bypassing the manual and mapping reality. And as we map reality, we take all the operational work happening in the business and we sort it. We physically categorize it into 3 distinct piles. This is the sorting process that saves companies from the 30% failure rate.
Okay, the 3 piles. I love a good framework. My business is mapped. We see the reality. Walk me through the sorting.
Pile 1 is the protected work. This is work that only a person can do. We talked about this at length earlier. Empathy, complex judgment, handling the angry customer, relationship building, strategic advisory. When we identify a task in your business that belongs in pile one, we put a massive metaphorical fence around it. We say, protected, do not touch. We do not try to automate this because trying to hand this work to a machine would actively destroy value and alienate your customers.
That makes perfect sense. That humans be human, protect the relationships. So what's the next pile?
Pile two is the most dangerous pile in any business. This is work a person is doing only because nobody ever built anything better. This is the infamous, we've always done it this way pile.
Oh, man. The 7 most expensive words in the history of business. We have always done it this way.
Precisely. You will find someone in your office who is spending 3 hours every single Tuesday morning manually formatting an elaborate spreadsheet report, pulling data from 5 different systems, and when you ask them why they do it, they say, because 5 years ago, the regional manager asked for it. But here's the kicker. That regional manager left the company 4 years ago. The report is still being painstakingly generated, and it is being emailed into a void where nobody ever opens it, reads it, or makes a decision based on it.
It's zombie work. The task is dead, but it keeps shuffling along, eating my payroll.
Okay.
So what do you do with pile 2? You obviously don't automate it.
Exactly. Automating a useless process is a profound waste of capital. It's making a stupid thing happen faster. With pile 2, you don't automate it, you just stop doing it. You eliminate the work entirely. You give that employee their 3 hours back and tell them to focus on something that matters. Which brings us finally to pile 3. Pile 3 is the gold mine. This is repetitive work that moves the business nowhere. It repeats daily or weekly. It has a highly predictable shape. It uses structured data. And crucially, it produces no strategic advantage no matter how perfectly it is executed.
Give me some really tangible examples of pile 3 work in a typical service business environment.
Rekeying data is the classic, most pervasive example. A field technician goes to a house, writes customer details and part numbers on a paper form or a tablet app that doesn't sync. Then, an admin in the back office has to read that form and manually type these exact same details into your main CRM or billing system. Taking data from point A and typing it into point B is moving the business nowhere. It's just friction. Another example is basic routing requests. An email comes into a general info@company.com inbox. An admin reads it, sees the word plumbing, and forwards it to the plumbing dispatcher. It's the exact same basic routing logic every single time. It requires no judgment, just pattern recognition.
Okay, so we've mapped reality, we've sorted everything. We protected pile 1, we violently eliminated pile 2, and we are left staring at a massive stack of tasks in pile 3. We've isolated the repetitive grunt work. What are the next steps?
Now, we apply the cold, hard math we discussed earlier. We look at pile 3, and we count the volume exclusively on those tasks. We find out exactly how many invoices are being processed, how many routing emails are being forwarded, how many manual data entry strokes are happening per month. Once we have the volume, we run the break-even math formula on every single task in that pile.
So we are stress testing them to find out which specific tasks actually cross the threshold and pay for themselves.
Yes. We ruthlessly discard the tasks that don't have the volume to justify the fixed costs. We don't automate them. For the tasks that actually survive the math, the ones that prove they will save you money, we rank them. We rank them by payback speed, which means how fast will this specific system pay for itself, and we rank them by operational risk, which means how catastrophic is it to the business if the automated system makes a mistake on day 2.
You want high speed, low risk.
Exactly. And the final output of all this effort, what the business owner actually gets at the end of this discovery process, is a written map. It is a comprehensive, mathematical, highly detailed blueprint of their entire operation, showing exactly where digital labor belongs, where humans belong, and the exact ROI they can expect. And the most critical point here, the thing that separates this from a software sales pitch, is that the owner leaves with this map regardless of whether they ever build a single automated system.
Okay, I want to pause right here and dig into this. When I look at the research for this deep dive, there are specialized operational firms out there that aggressively mandate this exact approach. They flat out refuse to sell you a software license or write a line of code until they build this operational map. And I had to be highly skeptical here, playing the role of the protective business owner. When a consultant sits across from me and tells me I need to pay them for a discovery phase or mapping phase before we even start the real work, my radar immediately goes up. Is that really a differentiator, or is it just consulting spin to pad the billable hours and extract a fee before they sell me the software anyway?
I completely appreciate the skepticism because there are a lot of bad actors in this space, but I will answer that plainly, based entirely on the evidence. Most of this industry, the vendors, the tech evangelists, the internal IT guys, they sell the capability first. They hand you the shiny tool, they collect their commission, and they cross their fingers hoping you somehow find a profitable use for it. That sequence, buy first, figure it out later, is the exact sequence that produces the 30% abandonment rate we talked about.
It's the buddy I mentioned at the top of the show.
Exactly. But starting strictly with the map and absolutely refusing to build anything until the math actually proves it out on paper is the literal difference between the 30% that end up in the trash and the 70% that actually pay back and generate profit. There is a specific, specialized firm that is a prime example of this methodology. They mandate the operational review. They start with the map, not the product.
So the map isn't a consulting trick. The map is the insurance policy against the dusty dashboard.
It is the only way to guarantee a return on investment. It proves the value before you assume the risk.
Speaking of return on investment, let's talk real-world timelines, because business owners are impatient. Once I have the map in hand, I've seen the math, and I pull the trigger on automating the top 3 tasks from pile 3, how long does it take to actually see the financial return hit my bank account?
Let's sketch out a brief, highly realistic timeline for an owner to set expectations. We call this the 2-year arc. It's not overnight, but it is fast compared to human capital.
Okay, the 2-year arc. Walk me through month 1.
Month 1 is everything we just talked about. Discovery and creating the map, watching the reality of the work, uncovering the mental duct tape, sorting the 3 piles, running the math, and identifying the exact target.
So month 1 is purely diagnostic. What happens in months 2 to 4?
In months 2 through 4, you do not try to boil the ocean. This is critical. You select one narrow, high-volume, low-risk process from pile 3, just one. And you choose it because it has relatively clean data and it will prove out fast. You build the automated side for that one task, and you run it in parallel with the existing human process for a few weeks before you fully cut over.
Why run it in parallel? Why not just flip the switch?
Because you are proving the concept, catching edge cases without disrupting the business, and most importantly, you're building trust with your staff. If you flip a switch and it breaks, your staff will reject the technology forever. If you run it in parallel and prove it works, they become champions of it. You are securing a quick win to build momentum.
Okay, get a quick win, build trust. What happens in the next phase, months 5 to 9?
Now you expand. But you do it strategically, based on the map. You expand into adjacent processes that share the exact same data as your first project. Think of the data like plumbing. Because you already built the digital pipes to extract customer information for the first task, you can just tap into those existing pipes for the second task. Because the data architecture is already built, every subsequent automated process is cheaper, faster, and less risky to implement than the last one.
Ah, I see. It's an economy of scale on the implementation side. You aren't starting from scratch every time. Okay, what about months 10 to 15?
This is where the operational magic actually happens. In months 10 to 15, you start connecting the endpoints. In the early phases, you might have an automated system doing a task, stopping, and handing a file to a human, who then uploads that file to another automated system. The human is acting as a bridge. In this phase, you connect the systems directly. The work begins to move from step A to step B to step C seamlessly, without a person ever having to carry the data across the gap.
The humans are finally completely out of the data carrying business. They're just reviewing the final output.
Exactly. And finally, months 16 to 24. This is the period of compounding returns. The systems are running smoothly in the background. The oversight tax has dropped significantly because the machine has learned the edge cases. Now you are actively reallocating that freed up human capacity to high-value tasks. Your dispatchers are doing proactive outbound sales calls. Your managers are focused on customer retention. And crucially, during this phase, you must revisit the operational map.
Why? Because the business has changed.
Yes. Because after 2 years of growth, your business has naturally evolved, new bottlenecks have formed, and you need to see if the 3 piles look different today than they did 24 months ago. It's a continuous cycle of improvement.
There's a very methodical, disciplined arc. But let's cut to the chase for the guy signing the checks. The ultimate comparison, the timing that truly matters to an owner. When do I get my money back? When does the investment turn green?
Here is the metric that changes minds when owners finally see it. A well-scoped automated process, chosen carefully using the math from the map, typically pays back its entire initial setup cost in 3 to 9 months.
3 to 9 months to completely break even on the capital expenditure.
Yes. Now compare that to human capital. Hiring, training, and ramping up a human being. Absorbing all those massive, fully loaded costs we talked about in the very beginning takes 12 to 24 months to reach that exact same point of baseline productivity and positive return for the business. The technology, when deployed correctly, pays back incredibly fast.
Okay, but I know how business owners think.
Mm.
We are fundamentally impatient people. I look at this 2-year arc and I see those massive compounding returns waiting for me in month 16. What happens if I'm impatient and I try to skip the early steps? What if I try to jump straight to month 10, bypass the single task pilot, and just automate the entire accounting department at once?
I will shut that idea down right now with extreme prejudice. If you try to skip the foundation, if you skip the map and skip the narrow proof of concept, that is exactly how you land squarely in the 30% of failures. You cannot skip the foundation. The complexity of trying to automate 10 things at once will overwhelm your dirty data, your staff will revolt because the interconnected processes will constantly break, and you will end up with a very expensive, totally abandoned project.
A cautionary tale, just like my buddy. You have to earn the compounding returns by doing the boring mapping work first. Okay, let's bring this all home. We've covered a massive amount of ground today, and I have to say, my own perspective as a business owner has fundamentally shifted over the course of this deep dive.
How so? What is the main thing that stands out to you, the skeptic?
When we started this conversation, I was firmly in the camp of the cynic. I saw my friends' hyped-up software purchase fail, I saw the money go down the drain, and I assumed the whole concept of digital labor was inherently flawed or exaggerated. But what finally changed my mind today is the math. The math for automated systems is entirely real. The cost savings per task and the productivity multipliers at scale are staggering. But, and this is the massive critical but that I missed before, it is strictly task-specific. You cannot apply a blanket assumption that automation is good to your entire business. The only way to know which of your specific tasks actually qualify for these returns is to look at all of them in the cold light of day. You have to build the map.
That is exactly the right takeaway. The map is everything. It is the dividing line between success and failure.
So for the listener who has been following along with us, maybe doing the break-even math in their head while driving between job sites today, what is the call to action here? What do they actually do tomorrow morning?
The call to action is deliberately not a hard sell for software. It is an offer of clarity. The required next step for any business owner who is serious about protecting their margins is a conversation, not a purchase. It is about bringing in experts who specialize entirely in the specific kind of operational review. In our research for this deep dive, we looked closely at how the best specialized operational firms operate. One specialized firm we researched offers an online meeting with their founder to walk through your specific operation, look at how your work flows, and find whether and where any of this technology actually fits.
So it's a diagnostic session. You sit down, talk about the friction points, and see if the math makes sense to even proceed.
Exactly. It's a diagnostic. And I want to leave the listener with a vital piece of reassurance regarding that meeting, because people are afraid of getting roped into a sales funnel. You may go through that entire discovery conversation, look at your operational volume, run the math, and leave that meeting knowing that automating nothing is the exact right answer for your business right now.
Nothing. For now. Just keep doing what you're doing.
Yes. And that is a perfectly legitimate, highly valuable outcome. If your volume doesn't support the fixed costs, walking away is the smartest business decision you can make. Finding that out with certainty before you spend a single dime on a software license is incredibly worth knowing. It saves you from becoming a 30% statistic.
So the advice is straightforward. Book the meeting with an operational expert. Get the operational review. Run the math on your pile 3 tasks. Find out your actual break-even thresholds. Get that clarity whether the answer is yes or no.
That is the only logical path forward. Take the time to get the map.
Incredible. Well, to you, the listener, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We've thrown a lot of unvarnished numbers and a lot of reality checks your way today, but hopefully gives you a new lens to look at your business through.
And as we close, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over. Something we haven't touched on yet, but that builds directly on everything we've discussed. Think about the end game of your business. Someday, you are going to want to step away, sell this company, or pass it on. Historically, a local service business was valued strictly on a multiple of its revenue and its physical assets, the trucks, the tools, the customer list. But we are rapidly entering an era where the valuation of a business will be fundamentally tied to its operational map. A buyer in the future isn't just going to look at your revenue. They're going to look at how much of your revenue is generated by expensive, chaotic human friction and how much is generated by streamlined, highly profitable digital labor. The businesses that figure out this hybrid model today aren't just saving money on invoice processing, they are actively multiplying the future enterprise value of their entire company. That map you build today might just be the most valuable asset you ever hand over to a buyer.
That is a profound way to look at it. It's not just about next month's payroll. It's about the permanent value of the asset you're building. Stop guessing, run the math, and get them out. Thanks for listening.